The morning sun was gentle that Thursday, soft and gold, the kind that made everything look kinder than it was. 76-year-old Lillian Moore stood at her bus stop, her purse clutched tight and a folded appointment card peeking from her wallet. She'd been waiting 2 months for this checkup. Blood pressure, diabetes, the usual. The bus came 10 minutes late, but that didn't bother her. She had time. She always made sure she had time. By the time she reached the clinic, the waiting room was already filling up. Mothers with kids, tired workers on lunch breaks, the same faces she saw every few months. Lillian smiled politely at the receptionist, sliding her card across the counter. "Morning, baby. I'm here for my 10:30 with Dr. Lewin." The young woman typed her name into the computer, frowned, typed again. "Could you spell your last name for me, ma'am?" "Moore, M-O-O-R." Click. Pause. Another click. Finally, the woman looked up. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Moore. I don't see you in the system." Lillian blinked. "Well, that can't be right. I got the card right here. Look." The receptionist took it gently, scanning the small white slip. "It says 10:30, yes, but this was printed 2 months ago. We switched to a new system last week." "So?" "The new system updates appointments automatically. It cancels and reschedules based on," she hesitated, choosing her words, "patient activity." Lillian's brows knitted together. "I didn't cancel nothing. I've been waiting for this." "I know, ma'am. It looks like your file was marked as inactive because of a missed appointment back in December." "That was when I had the flu," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I called and told them." "I'm sorry," the receptionist said again. "When we moved to the new program, the system automatically filtered out patients marked as low activity. It's supposed to help reduce no-shows." Lillian stood there, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "So, I disappeared?" The receptionist offered an apologetic smile. "You can schedule a new one, but the next opening's 3 weeks out." She sat down slowly in the waiting area, her knees stiff and her chest tight. Around her, the room hummed with quiet chatter and the soft buzz of the television mounted on the wall. The nurse called another name, not hers. She held her appointment card like proof of existence. "I was here. I did everything right." When she got home, she called her daughter, Tanya. "Baby," she said, "they said my appointment wasn't in their computer." "What do you mean, Mama? You had it written down." "I did, but they said the system took it off. Some new kind of program. Said I didn't show up before." Tanya's voice grew sharp. "You mean the time you called because you were sick?" "Yes, that one." Tanya sighed. "I'll handle it. You just rest, okay?" "I'm fine," Lillian said softly, but her voice carried something deeper, the quiet frustration of being told she didn't count again. That evening, Tanya drove to her mother's house, laptop in hand. She logged into the clinic's patient portal, clicking through the tabs until she found the record. There it was, a red line through her mother's name under Appointment History. Status, removed from predictive queue. Tanya frowned. Predictive queue? What does that even mean? A message box popped up at the bottom of the screen. Automated scheduling updates reduce cancellations and optimize availability. Tanya muttered, "Optimize for who?" The next day, Tanya called the clinic and spoke to an administrator. "Ma'am," she began, "why was my mother's appointment canceled?" The woman on the line replied in a rehearsed tone. "Our scheduling system uses predictive technology to manage patient load. It adjusts automatically based on prior attendance, age, and type of insurance." "So because she's 76 and on Medicare, she's less predictable?" Tanya asked, her voice trembling with anger. "Not exactly," the woman said, faltering. "Just lower priority for auto-scheduling." Tanya's voice went quiet. "You mean the system decided my mother wasn't worth reminding?" There was a pause. I'm sure that's not what it meant. But that's what it did. That night, Lillian sat at her kitchen table, appointment card still in front of her. She traced the ink with her fingertip. "You know, baby," she said softly to Tanya, "when I was young, they used to make us wait in the colored line at the clinic. Now it's a computer doing it. Same wait, fancier excuse." Tanya reached over, squeezed her mother's hand. "Not this time, Mama. We're not waiting. We're fixing it." Lillian Moore never missed her appointments. But somewhere between a database update and a line of code, she vanished, not by mistake, but by design. The system didn't forget her name. It just stopped calling it. When care turns into calculation, people like Lillian don't get erased all at once. They just slowly fade from the calendar. Next, Tanya learns how the new scheduling system works and how a computer built to save time learned to measure who's worth remembering. The next morning, Tanya sat at her mother's kitchen table, coffee mug in hand, laptop open. Lillian was folding towels nearby, humming softly to a gospel tune on the radio, as if nothing had happened the day before. But Tanya couldn't shake it. She kept staring at the words on the screen, removed from predictive queue. "How can a queue predict people?" she muttered. Lillian chuckled. "Baby, if you figured that out, let me know. I could use a reminder when my shows come on." Tanya smiled faintly, but her frustration simmered beneath the surface. She clicked through the clinic's online portal again, pages of fine print, all promising innovation and efficiency. Then she saw it, a banner across the top of the website. Now powered by CareFlow AI, smarter scheduling, faster service. She clicked it. A cheerful video popped up with upbeat music and doctors smiling into the camera. A narrator explained how the new system worked. CareFlow AI uses data from previous visits, insurance type, and patient reliability to forecast attendance and automatically prioritize patients most likely to show up. Tanya paused the video, her eyes narrowing. "Most likely to show up," she repeated. "That's code for most profitable." She called the clinic's administrative office again and asked to speak with someone from the IT department. After a few transfers, a young man picked up. His voice was friendly but cautious. "Ma'am, I can't share internal configurations," he said, "but the scheduling algorithm uses something called a reliability index. It looks at missed appointments, insurance history, age, and travel distance. So my mother gets downgraded because she's old, lives far from the clinic, and missed one appointment she called about in advance?" "Technically, yes," he admitted. "The system interprets that as a higher no-show probability." Tanya's tone turned flat. "And the computer decides that without talking to anyone?" "Yes, it's designed to save time for staff by automating rebooking and cancellations." She laughed bitterly. "It didn't save my mother's time." That night, Tanya couldn't sleep. She started digging, article after article about AI scheduling tools in healthcare. Every piece sounded the same: reducing wait times, streamlining efficiency, predicting attendance. But buried halfway through one report, she found a line that made her sit up straight. "Preliminary data indicates a disproportionate rate of automatic cancellations among older and uninsured patients." She read it twice, whispering the words, "automatic cancellations." Another article quoted a hospital executive boasting that their no-show rates had dropped by 30% after switching to predictive scheduling. The reason? The system had simply stopped scheduling people it labeled high risk. The next day, Tanya showed the article to Dr. Lung, her mother's longtime physician. He read it quietly, then sighed. "I believe it. We were told the system would optimize patient flow, but I've noticed familiar names disappearing from my schedule." He looked genuinely pained. "The people who need us most are the ones the algorithm can't predict, so it forgets them." Tanya frowned. "But you could re-add them, right?" Sometimes, but the system doesn't alert us when it removes someone. If I don't check the logs, I never know who's missing. So it's just deleting people quietly? He nodded. It's not personal, it's math. That evening, Tanya brought home printouts for her mother. Lillian listened carefully as Tanya explained how the system worked, the reliability index, the risk scoring, the silent cancellations. Lillian sighed. So, the computer figures out who's likely to show up by looking at who's had trouble before. Exactly. Then it never gives folks like me a chance to do better. Tanya smiled sadly. That's the problem with perfect systems. They stop believing people can change. Lillian nodded. Sounds a lot like people, if you ask me. Later that week, Tanya attended a community health meeting at her church. When she told the group what happened, heads nodded around the room. A man in the back spoke up. They did that to my mama too. Said her appointment disappeared after they switched computers. Another woman added, I never get reminders anymore. Used to get texts. Now I just hope they still got me in the book. Tanya looked around. See, it's not just us. It's everyone who doesn't fit their idea of reliable. An older lady murmured, We used to wait on hold for hours. Now we just wait on silence. That night, Tanya sat by her mother's bed, watching her breathe easily, peacefully. She whispered, You did everything right, Mama. It's the system that forgot you. Lillian's eyes fluttered open. Then make it remember, baby. CareFlow AI was built to save time, and it did. But the time it saved came from people like Lillian Moore, whose name slipped quietly off the calendar in the name of optimization. The machine didn't make a mistake. It just learned to believe that some people's time mattered more than others. Next, Tanya discovers what happens inside the computer's logic, how one missed appointment and one wrong data point turned her mother into a low-value patient. The following week, Tanya sat across from a young technician in a small windowless IT office at the clinic. The hum of servers filled the room, a steady electronic heartbeat. The technician, Jordan, looked nervous as he opened a spreadsheet on his monitor. Rows of patient data scrolled by, names, numbers, color-coded columns labeled Reliability Index, Risk Score, Recall Tier. Tanya leaned closer. So this is it? This is where my mother disappeared? Jordan nodded. Everything the AI decides runs through here. Every appointment, every reminder. He clicked on her mother's file. The line turned red. Next to Lillian Moore's name were 3 notes. Missed appointment, December 2032. Age, 76. Insurance type, Medicare. In the far right column under Scheduling Probability, the number read 0.42. Jordan sighed. The system flags anything below 0.5 as low confidence. It stops sending reminders automatically. Tanya's jaw clenched. So because she's 76 and had the flu once, the computer just gives up on her? He hesitated. Technically, yes. It thinks she's less likely to show. She leaned forward. She did show up. That's the problem. Jordan nodded, eyes downcast. I know, but the system can't see the difference between missed and excused. It just sees absence. Tanya exhaled slowly. So it doesn't just forget, it assumes. Later that day, Tanya brought the printout home and laid it on the kitchen table in front of her mother. Lillian adjusted her glasses and read the first line aloud. Scheduling probability, 0.42. What's that mean? It means the computer decided you were a coin flip. Lillian chuckled softly. Well, I've been called worse. But her smile faded as she kept reading. Age factor, high risk. Insurance type, low reliability. She paused. Low reliability? I've had the same doctor for 15 years. I know, Tanya said. It's not about you. It's about how the system reads you. Well, it read me wrong. Tanya nodded. And it did the same to a lot of people. That night, Tanya wrote an email to the hospital's tech vendor, CareFlow Systems. She didn't expect a reply, but 2 days later, she got one. Thank you for reaching out. Our predictive scheduling system uses anonymized data to identify patients at higher risk of no-shows. We do not discriminate. Our model simply optimizes efficiency for the majority. Tanya read it out loud to her mother. Optimizes efficiency for the majority, she said, shaking her head. So if you're not in the majority, you just disappear. Lillian smirked. They found a polite way to say, I'm not worth the reminder. Later that week, Tanya met with Dr. Lung again. He looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from carrying too much guilt for things beyond your control. I checked your mother's file, he said. The AI reclassified her as inactive. That means she stopped showing up in my dashboard too. Tanya frowned. You mean you wouldn't have even known she was due? He shook his head. No, unless I went looking for her specifically. So the system erased her twice. Once from her reminder list, once from yours. He sighed. It was meant to help us manage time. Instead, it's costing people theirs. That evening, Tanya pulled out a notebook and began listing everything she'd learned. 1. One missed appointment counted as no-show. 2. Age over 70 flagged as high cancellation risk. 3. Medicare deprioritized in scheduling queue. 4. All combined, inactive patient. She stared at the page. Every factor that made her mother vulnerable was treated as a reason to forget her. She whispered. It's not that the machine doesn't care. It just doesn't know how. When she showed the list to her mother, Lillian gave a sad little smile. You know, baby, this reminds me of how banks used to treat us back in the day. Too risky to loan to, too poor to keep records on. Now it's hospitals doing it, just fancier. Tanya nodded. You're right. They call it progress, but it's the same pattern, just coded different. That night, Tanya posted a photo of the printout online with the caption, My mother's appointment disappeared because a computer decided she wasn't reliable. Efficiency should never erase humanity. The post went viral overnight. Thousands of comments flooded in from people sharing similar stories. One wrote, My grandma's mammogram reminder vanished too. Another said, They said my dad's record was archived because he missed one visit. He's 83. Tanya scrolled through them, her anger slowly giving way to resolve. They're not going to hide behind the word efficiency anymore, she said softly. The AI hadn't broken. It was working exactly as it was told. It learned from a system where reliability was defined by privilege, where showing up late once meant never being called again. It wasn't just a scheduling glitch. It was a mirror showing how the healthcare system valued convenience over compassion. Next, Tanya takes her mother's story public, confronting the administrators who built the system and forcing them to explain why efficiency always seems to forget the people who need care most. By the time Tanya's post hit 500,000 views, the clinic's phone lines were flooded. People from all over the city called, asking if their names were still in the system. The clinic staff, overwhelmed, could only offer the same thin answer. If you didn't get a reminder, please call back to confirm. Tanya's inbox filled with messages. Seniors, caregivers, and working parents all telling the same story in different words. I showed up, and they said I wasn't there. Her mother shook her head. Feels like deja vu. Back in the day, they told us we didn't exist on paper. Now it's on a screen. A week later, Tanya got a call from the clinic administrator, Mr. Rayburn, the same man who defended the AI system a month earlier. He sounded less confident this time. Ms. Moore, he began carefully, I saw your post. We'd like to invite you to a meeting to discuss possible solutions. Solutions? Tanya repeated. You mean accountability? There was a pause. Let's just call it collaboration. The meeting was held in a conference room on the top floor, Walls of glass, too much air conditioning, a bowl of untouched mints in the center of the table. Tanya sat across from three people: Rayburn, the clinic's chief operations officer, and a representative from CareFlow AI. The representative, a woman in a crisp navy suit, began with a practiced smile. "Ms. Moore, first, let me assure you, our system does not discriminate." Tanya folded her arms. "Then why does it forget the same kind of people over and over?" Rayburn cleared his throat. "There have been some inconsistencies in how the algorithm weighs attendance history." "Inconsistencies?" Tanya said sharply. "My mother had her appointment card. She didn't forget. You did." The woman from CareFlow kept her smile tight. "The system uses predictive modeling to reduce wasted time slots. Some demographic factors may appear correlated, but there's no intent to target anyone." Tanya leaned forward. "You don't need intent to cause harm. You just need indifference dressed up as innovation." The room went quiet. Finally, the operations officer spoke. "Look, we admit the algorithm might have unintended bias. We're working on a patch." "A patch?" Tanya said, disbelief in her voice. "My mother doesn't need a patch. She needs proof she matters." He sighed. "We're bound by policy, Ms. Moore. Changing the system takes time." Tanya stared at him. "And what do my people do while you're taking time? Keep getting lost in your system?" No one answered. That evening, Tanya recorded a short video message on her phone. She sat at her kitchen table, her mother's folded appointment card beside her. "My mama's name didn't disappear because of a glitch," she said into the camera. "It disappeared because someone thought older people with Medicare were bad for business. They called it efficiency. I call it erasure." She posted it online with the caption, #StillWaiting. Within days, local news picked it up, then national outlets. Anchors debated whether algorithmic bias was the next frontier in healthcare inequality. Soon, CareFlow released a statement. "We are committed to transparency and will review our data parameters for unintended demographic impact." Tanya read it on her phone and laughed bitterly. Translation: "They'll look busy while doing nothing." Her mother, sipping tea beside her, said softly, "Baby, they always apologize in fancy words first. Then they wait to see if we stop talking." Tanya smiled faintly. "Then let's make sure we don't." A few days later, a congressional subcommittee announced an investigation into automated scheduling systems in healthcare. The official notice cited potential inequity in patient recall mechanisms, bureaucratic language for what Tanya already knew. People were disappearing from care because they weren't profitable to remember. When reporters asked her for comment, Tanya said simply, "You can't call it healthcare if the system decides who deserves to show up." Meanwhile, at the clinic, quiet panic spread among staff. Nurses whispered that management told them not to discuss the Lillian Moore situation. But one nurse, who'd known Lillian for years, slipped Tanya a note in the hallway. "We told them it was wrong. They said the numbers looked good on paper." Tanya folded the note, her jaw tightening. "Paper never felt chest pain," she muttered. The next week, CareFlow executives flew in for damage control. They held a press conference, standing behind a banner that read, "Building a Smarter, Fairer Future." A reporter asked if the company would suspend the scheduling program during the investigation. The CEO replied, "That would cause system-wide delays." Tanya, watching from her living room, whispered, "So efficiency still comes first." Her mother nodded. "Always has. But baby, at least now they have to say it out loud." The policymakers spoke of unintended consequences. The company spoke of optimization. But for people like Lillian, it was simpler than that. The system forgot her and then told her it was for her own good. Progress had become a numbers game, and compassion wasn't part of the calculation. Next, Tanya uncovers the real story behind the data. Leaked reports proving that executives knew older patients were being deprioritized long before the system went live. It started with an email from an address Tanya didn't recognize. Subject line, "You need to see this." Attached were 3 documents labeled Internal Review Careflow Scheduling Model. The sender had written only one sentence. They knew about the bias before launch. Tanya's pulse quickened as she opened the first file. It was a PowerPoint presentation, dense with charts and acronyms. But one slide stood out, a simple bar graph with the title, Recall Probability by Age and Insurance Type. The bars told a story no press release ever would. Patients under 50 with private insurance, 87% retention. Patients over 70 with Medicare, 39%. Her mother, the low probability patient, was right there in the math. She opened the second document, a series of internal emails. From Data Analyst, Careflow, to Director of Operations. Preliminary testing shows senior patients dropped from automated scheduling due to low reliability scores, recommending human verification for high-risk groups. The response came 2 hours later. From Director of Operations. Adding manual review would reduce automation efficiency, delay fix until post-launch audit. Tanya leaned back in her chair, stunned. "They saw it and still went live," she whispered. The third document hit even harder, a financial summary. At the bottom of the page, one line was highlighted in yellow. Projected time savings, plus 22%. Estimated reduction in missed appointments, plus 18%. Equity impact, negligible. She repeated the last word under her breath. Negligible. Her mother's name, her health, her worth, filed under a corporate shrug. That night, Tanya brought the files to Dr. Lewin. He read them slowly, his brow furrowed. "This isn't just negligence," he said quietly. "It's design." "They knew the algorithm erased older patients," Tanya said. "They just called it a trade-off." Dr. Lewin sighed. "You'd be surprised how often that word comes up. Trade-off. It makes cruelty sound like strategy." By morning, Tanya had sent the documents to a journalist she trusted, the same one who'd covered her mother's first story. 2 days later, the headline ran everywhere. Careflow new. Leaked memos show company ignored bias warnings before rollout. The article quoted directly from the emails. Adding safeguards may reduce optimization goals. Impact on senior patients expected but acceptable within error margins. The piece ended with a photo of Lillian sitting at her kitchen table holding her faded appointment card. Caption: "She showed up for care. The system decided she wasn't worth scheduling." The backlash was immediate. Lawmakers called for hearings. Patient advocacy groups demanded suspension of Careflow AI. And for the first time, the company's executives were summoned to testify. During the hearing, one congresswoman read Tanya's leaked email aloud to the CEO. Adding safeguards may reduce optimization goals. Then she looked up. "So, Mr. Keller, your company decided efficiency mattered more than elderly lives. Was that an optimization or an omission?" The CEO shifted uncomfortably. "We regret any unintended consequences." "Consequences don't get to be unintended when you were warned," she snapped. At home, Lillian watched the hearing on TV. "They sure like that word, unintended," she said. Tanya nodded. "Makes it sound like an accident, not a decision." Her mother smiled sadly. "Baby, I lived through decades of unintended, but at least now they're getting caught." Within a week, Careflow stock dropped 20%. Their public relations team scrambled to contain the damage, issuing yet another statement. "We are deeply sorry. We will implement fairness protocols immediately." Tanya laughed when she read it. Funny how fairness becomes urgent when the cameras show up. Dr. Lewin texted her that night. "You did it. They'll have to rewrite their system from the ground up." Tanya replied, Good. Let's make sure they don't rewrite the excuses, too. A few days later, Tanya received another anonymous email, this time from a hospital employee. Attached was a single slide titled Future Mitigation Strategies. At the bottom, it read, rename Reliability Index to Engagement Score. Remove public reference to age or insurance weighting. She groaned. So instead of fixing it, they're just changing the words. Lillian, sitting nearby, smiled knowingly. Baby, that's how power apologizes, with a thesaurus. Still, something had shifted. Across the country, hospitals began quietly auditing their own systems. One by one, they discovered similar issues. Older patients deleted from reminders. Low-income neighborhoods tagged manual recall. Non-English names mismatched in databases. The machine hadn't just failed one woman, it had learned to fail a pattern. The paper trail left no room for denial. Bias wasn't a bug in the system, it was a budget line. They called it optimization, but what it really meant was that convenience had become more valuable than compassion. Next, Tanya joins a growing coalition of doctors, seniors, and lawmakers to build the Right to Recall Act, a reform that would force every AI in healthcare to prove fairness before touching a single patient's file. The story had gone national. News outlets across the country were running the same headline in different words. Thousands of seniors may have been dropped by automated scheduling systems. On talk shows, anchors debated whether artificial intelligence was the next civil rights frontier. For most people, it was a story about technology. For Tanya and her mother, it was a story about time. The hours lost, the care delayed, the reminders that never came. Calls began pouring into their home phone. People wanted to share their stories. A man from Ohio said his father missed a cancer screening because his reminder stopped coming after a missed follow-up. A retired teacher from Florida said her mammogram appointments just disappeared from her online portal. And one woman from Arizona cried as she said, "My husband thought they canceled on him. He didn't know they canceled him." Tanya listened to every call, jotting notes in a worn yellow notebook. When she finally looked down, the page was full. Names, dates, hospitals, zip codes. Each line was a person who'd been quietly erased. Her mother looked over her shoulder. "Lord, that's a lot of folks." "It's everywhere," Tanya said softly. "The same pattern. Older, fixed income, public insurance. The machine learned to skip them." Clara sighed. "We used to say the system failed us. Now it's literal." Soon, churches and senior centers began organizing. They held recall clinics, helping people check if their medical records were still active. Community volunteers printed flyers with bold letters. "Show up, even if the computer says you're not there." The hashtag "still waiting" became a movement. People started posting photos of themselves holding old appointment cards, standing in front of clinics, some smiling, some defiant, some tired but unbroken. At a press conference in Washington, one journalist asked Tanya what hashtag "still waiting" meant. She answered without hesitation. "It means we're not invisible. It means our time matters, even when the computer forgets us. We built this healthcare system. We pay into it. We deserve to be seen by it." The crowd applauded, cameras flashing. Meanwhile, a group of medical researchers released a new report. AI scheduling systems disproportionately affect older adults and minority populations. 61% of canceled appointments involved patients over 65. 44% were linked to Medicare coverage. Black and Latino patients were twice as likely to be marked low reliability. The conclusion was blunt. Automation without oversight reproduces bias at scale. Tanya read the report and whispered, "They finally said it out loud." Her mother nodded. Baby, they had to. You made it impossible not to. As awareness grew, something else started to happen. Clinics that once ignored complaints began calling patients personally. Doctors apologized. Some hospitals even mailed out letters admitting technical errors and inviting patients back for rescheduled care. One evening, Lillian opened her mailbox and found one of those letters. It began, "Dear Mrs. Moore, we are deeply sorry for the error that caused your name to be removed from our scheduling system." She chuckled softly. "They remembered me after all." Tanya smiled. "You think they mean it?" Lillian folded the letter carefully. "I think they mean they got caught." Weeks later, Tanya was invited to speak at a healthcare technology conference. Standing on a stage in front of engineers and executives, she said, "I'm not here to talk about code. I'm here to talk about consequence. My mother almost disappeared from care because the system learned to think like the world that built it. Impatient with the elderly, suspicious of the poor, blind to its own bias." She paused, scanning the crowd. "If your algorithms can predict efficiency, they can predict exclusion too. And if you're not checking for that, then your progress isn't progress. It's just polished neglect." The room was silent. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Soon the whole room stood. Afterward, a young engineer approached her. "I joined this company to help people," he said. "I didn't realize we'd started deciding which people mattered most." Tanya smiled. "Then you know what to do next." He nodded. "Fix it." Back home that night, Lillian watched her daughter's speech on TV. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "You're doing what I couldn't, baby. You're making them listen." Tanya kissed her forehead. "I'm just making sure you don't get erased again." It was no longer about one missed appointment. It was about a system that decided whose time was worth remembering and whose could quietly disappear. What began with one woman's name missing from a calendar had become a national reckoning about what fairness looks like in the age of automation. Next, the movement reaches Congress, where Tanya and a coalition of advocates fight to turn outrage into action, pushing for the Right to Recall Act that would protect every patient's right to be remembered. The hearing room was packed. Television crews lined the back wall, and every seat was taken. Patients with canes, nurses in scrubs, and tired families clutching stacks of paperwork that told stories the system had tried to forget. A banner above the panel read, "U.S. Senate Committee on Healthcare Technology Public Oversight Hearing." Tanya sat at the front beside her mother Lillian. Her palms were damp, but her eyes were steady. When the chairwoman banged the gavel, the room quieted. "Today," she said, "we are here to discuss the Right to Recall Act, a bill that would ensure no patient is ever removed from care without a human review." She turned to Tanya. "Ms. Moore, please begin." Tanya took a deep breath, adjusted the microphone, and spoke clearly. "My mother is 76. She's punctual, polite, and proud. She's also the reason I'm here. Last year, she showed up for her doctor's appointment, same as always, but the system said she wasn't scheduled. Not because she forgot, but because a computer decided she wasn't reliable." The room murmured softly. She held up her mother's faded appointment card. "This is proof that she was there. The only thing missing was her name in a database." She paused, her voice steady but full of heat. "I've heard executives call this a glitch, but a glitch doesn't target the same kind of people every time. It doesn't erase the elderly, the poor, the uninsured. That's not a glitch. That's a mirror." Behind her, Dr. Lung nodded quietly. He was next to testify, explaining how doctors were losing track of patients because of the same algorithms meant to help them. He told the senators, "Efficiency without empathy is malpractice." Applause broke out before the chairwoman gently called the room to order. Next, the hearing turned to the CEO of CareFlow Systems, a man with sharp glasses, smooth words, and a PR smile. "Mr. Keller," a senator asked, Your own documents show you knew older patients were being deprioritized. Why wasn't this fixed? Keller shifted in his seat. Senator, implementing a fairness review would have delayed deployment. We needed to meet hospital efficiency benchmarks. So, the senator pressed, you chose speed over safety? Keller hesitated. We chose optimization. The senator leaned forward. And you optimized people out of care. A ripple of applause spread across the room. When it was Tanya's turn to respond, she didn't use anger, just truth. You call it optimization, she said. We call it omission. You saved minutes on a clock and lost months from people's lives. She held up a printout of the leaked memo again. It says, equity impact, negligible. That's what my mother was to your system, negligible. And I want to make sure no one ever wears that word. The audience stood, clapping until the gavel struck again. Later that week, the committee released its findings. Their report opened with a single, unforgettable line. The disappearance of patients from scheduling systems is not a technical issue, it is a human one. Within days, the Right to Recall Act gained bipartisan support. The key provisions were clear and strong. 1. Human oversight mandate. No patient over 65 can be auto-removed from scheduling without manual review. 2. Transparency rule. All healthcare AI must publicly report deletion or recall rates by age, income, and insurance. 3. Fairness testing. Any algorithm used in patient care must undergo an equity audit before release. 4. The Moore Clause, named after Lillian. Every patient has the right to be notified, verified, and remembered. The bill passed the Senate by an overwhelming margin, 92-8. When the president signed it into law, cameras flashed as he handed the ceremonial pen to Lillian. Mrs. Moore, he said warmly, because of you, no one will be quietly deleted again. Lillian smiled. Well, I may forget a few things these days, she said, but I never forget to show up. The crowd laughed and applauded, but some were wiping tears. In the months that followed, hospitals across the country began reforming their systems. The phrase, human verified, started appearing beside every digital appointment. Some clinics even added an old-fashioned touch, paper backup lists pinned to bulletin boards just in case. At the front desk of Lillian's clinic, a new sign hung proudly. The Moore Clause, because showing up should be enough to be seen. That evening, back home, Tanya and Lillian sat on their porch as the sun set. Cicadas hummed in the distance. Tanya turned to her mother. You realize you've got your name in a federal law now. Lillian chuckled. I guess that's one appointment I didn't miss. They fixed the system because one woman refused to accept being forgotten. And in doing so, they reminded the world that fairness isn't just about access, it's about acknowledgement. When technology started making decisions about who deserved to be remembered, Lillian Moore made sure her story stayed right on the calendar. Next, in the final part, the movement comes full circle, as Lillian helps other seniors reclaim their place in the system, teaching them that being seen is the first step to being healed. The summer after the bill passed, the clinic waiting room felt different. Not louder or busier, just warmer. There were new signs on the walls now, simple but powerful. Every appointment verified by a human. The Moore Clause, in effect. And sitting in the middle of that room, cane by her side and smile on her face, was Lillian Moore herself, waiting not for care this time, but for company. The nurse came out, holding a clipboard. Mrs. Moore, ready for your class? Lillian chuckled. Born ready, baby. She stood slowly and walked toward the community room where a dozen seniors were seated in folding chairs. Some had their own stories, missed reminders, lost files, canceled appointments that never got rebooked. They listened quietly as Lillian began to speak. I used to think being forgotten was just part of getting old, she said. You call, you wait, you remind folks who you are. But now I know it wasn't me that was forgetful. It was the system. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. But here's the good news, she continued. The law says we don't have to vanish anymore. If they can predict who to call, they can predict who they forgot to. The class laughed softly. She showed them how to check their records on the new Fair Recall portal. It was simple. Type your name, date of birth, and if your appointment was delayed or removed, a message would appear. Human review in progress. See, Lillian said, tapping the screen gently. That means somebody's looking out for you, not a computer, a person. An older man in the back raised his hand. So, it's really fixed? Lillian smiled. Honey, nothing's ever fully fixed, but now it's fair. That night, she sat with Tanya on the porch. The air was heavy with the smell of jasmine and warm rain. Tanya handed her mother a folded newspaper. Across the top, the headline read, "The Right to Recall Act reduces missed care for seniors by 70%. Beneath it, a photo of Lillian speaking at the clinic. Her cane leaned against the podium, her eyes bright. Lillian smiled softly. I never thought my face would end up in a newspaper for just showing up. Tanya laughed. That's the lesson, Mama. Sometimes showing up is the bravest thing. A week later, they were invited to Washington again. This time, not for hearings, for recognition. Lillian received an award from the Department of Health and Human Services for Community Advocacy and Equity in Healthcare. As she stood on stage, cameras flashing, she said, "I didn't build a new system, I just reminded it who it's supposed to serve. I'm not an engineer, I'm just a woman who kept her appointment." The crowd gave a standing ovation. Back home, Lillian returned to her quiet life, cooking, attending church, walking to the corner store when her legs felt strong enough. But people stopped her sometimes on the street. "Mrs. Moore," they'd say, "you helped my mother get her appointments back." Or, "My dad got a letter because of you." And every time she'd smile and say, "Good, that's how it's supposed to work." One afternoon, Tanya found her mother at the kitchen table, writing in her notebook, the same one she used to keep her old appointment cards. "What are you working on, Mama?" Lillian looked up and grinned. A list of things to remember. She read the first few lines aloud. Don't let silence sound normal. Always ask for proof, not promises. Never let them call fairness complicated. Then she looked up. "You know, baby, when I was little, they taught us to be patient. But I think the world needs less patience and more persistence." Tanya smiled. "You taught them both." That evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Lillian stood by her front door looking at her calendar. Every date was filled now. Appointments, church potlucks, birthdays, her new rights and records workshop. She laughed quietly. "Guess I'm hard to forget now." She penned one last note to the calendar, written in her careful cursive. "Show up, speak up, stay on the list." Lillian Moore didn't set out to change healthcare. She just wanted her name back on the calendar. But her quiet persistence rewrote how the country defines care, not as a privilege of efficiency, but as a promise of remembrance. Technology may keep time, but people keep meaning. And as long as we remember that, no one ever truly disappears. The Moore Clause, 2034. Because showing up should always mean being seen. If this story moved you, share it. Someone you love might still be waiting for their reminder. Subscribe to Older Black Person Stories, When Data Meets Dignity, for more true stories about justice, empathy, and the right to be remembered.